Pilot tells black girl to stop pretending. She's rich freezes when her name appears on the jet side. Have you ever heard a single remark that instantly changed the way you saw someone? A casual comment that revealed a hidden prejudice only to backfire in the most dramatic way possible. Today, we're diving into a story of power and pride, ignorance and privilege, where a pilot can't help but judge a young black woman who dares to dream big. He scoffs at her every move, convinced she's playing make-believe about her wealth and status. Little does he know, destiny has a plot twist waiting just around the corner. Get ready for a shocking tale that will turn the tables and knock the breath out of anyone who dares to underestimate another. A warm summer breeze floated across Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, ruffling the edges of every plastic seat in the private lounge area. The smell of fresh coffee lingered, competing with the hum of jet engines and the squeak of rolling suitcases. Among the expanse of marble floors and glossy black chairs, an 18-year-old young woman named Nia Simmons paced anxiously, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. Her hair was intricately braided, pinned back in a neat bun, and her favorite book, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, peeked out of her small tote bag. Nia was waiting for a flight that wasn't your average commercial airline venture. Today, she was scheduled to fly on a private jet, a new Gulfstream 700 that she had been told her father's company had just purchased. She'd never seen it. She had never even taken a single step aboard a private jet in her life. Yet there she was, excited and nervous about heading to London for a summer spent shadowing the top executives at her father's multinational consulting firm. Nia's father, David Simmons, was a business phenomenon. Self-made, he had grown a small financial consultancy into a global powerhouse. She heard others speak of him as though he were a legend. Clients praised him for his fairness. Employees adored him for his empathy. Despite his success, he'd never turned into a cold corporate figure, but stayed humble and quiet, still remembering his roots in a struggling neighborhood of Chicago. He had insisted that, until Nia reached 18, she would experience a normal life. No diamond shoes or extravagant parties, no chauffeured rides to high school. The plan had been to ground her firmly so that she would comprehend both the privilege and the responsibility of wealth. So Nia spent most of her life just like anyone else. She'd attended a public school, participated in extracurriculars, had chores at home, and babysat the neighbors' kids on weekends. She was grateful to her father for teaching her the value of hard work and empathy. Yet even with her relatively normal upbringing, she couldn't help but be aware that people sometimes looked at her oddly when they discovered who her father was. On a few occasions, she'd endured not-so-subtle comments about whether she belonged in certain spaces or was just faking it. The remarks stung every time. Still, she persevered, knowing that soon enough she would be forging her own path in life. Now, as she paced in the posh private lounge, wearing comfortable jeans and a pastel cardigan, she looked around at the sea of high-heeled, suited individuals and felt out of place once again. She silently rehearsed lines for her father's upcoming corporate internship, trying to cultivate the confidence she knew she'd need. If she was going to follow in his footsteps, she had to learn how to walk the walk. But it wasn't going to be easy. After all, the corporate world was notoriously tough, and, as a young black woman, she already had an extra obstacle: cynicism from those who would judge her at first glance. Captain Todd Mitchell had seen it all, or so he liked to believe. He was a veteran pilot with over 25 years of flying experience, primarily with commercial airlines. Recent changes in the airline industry had left him feeling burnt out and unappreciated, so he jumped ship to work for private charter companies that flew the rich and famous. The money was certainly better, and he prided himself on a top-notch safety record and a disciplined approach to the job. But there was a side to Todd that wasn't so admirable. He seethed with resentment sometimes, especially toward the spoiled brats he believed he encountered in this world. Why should they get to gallivant around on Daddy's dime while he had to endure nerve-wracking flights through thunderstorms? He believed many of these wealthy kids were all flash with no substance. He saw them as individuals who had no concept of the value of $1 or the sweat that went into earning it. As Captain Todd headed toward the pilot's lounge, he noticed a slender black girl standing near the reception desk of the private flight area. She looked young, no older than 18 or 19, and her attire was casual. No flashy handbag, no bodyguard, no entourage. Another one trying to play in big leagues she doesn't belong to? Todd wondered cynically. The lounge attendant waved Todd over, pointing to Nia. She's with the Simmons party, the attendant explained. Here to take the new Gulfstream 700 to London. The Simmons party? Todd repeated. He recognized the name. David Simmons was rumored to be purchasing a brand new jet for his business travels. The boss man is supposed to be here, right? Mr. Simmons will arrive shortly, the attendant confirmed. In the meantime, his daughter is waiting. She'll be flying with you today, he nodded, giving Nia a curt glance. She offered a friendly smile, but Todd's mind was already churning with cynicism. He didn't like how casually she was dressed. He didn't like how her braided hair was pinned. He noticed her scuffed sneakers. Rich kids wear expensive shoes, not those battered things, he thought. Todd decided she must be a tag-along friend, or maybe she was fishing for a chance to say she flew on a private jet. Could it be possible that this scuffed-up teenager was David Simmons's daughter? He had never met David or his family personally. He only knew the name because the entire private charter industry had been abuzz about the new 700 purchase. As Todd walked past, he heard her quietly asking the attendant, "Do we have a set departure time yet? I'm really excited, but want to be sure everything is going smoothly." The attendant explained that they were simply awaiting Mr. Simmons's arrival, but everything else was set. Todd interjected, "Maybe you should, I don't know, keep your feet on the ground until the real VIP arrives." He tried to cloak his comment in a casual tone, but the attendant and Nia both caught the condescension. Nia blinked, confused. "Excuse me, sir, I'm just asking a question." Todd shrugged. "I get it. It's your first time on a private jet, right? Let's just say you might be building up unrealistic expectations. Sometimes flights get delayed, or VIPs don't even show up. Maybe it'd be better not to pretend too much until it's official." Nia frowned, unsettled by his dismissive tone. "I'm not pretending anything," she replied quietly, but with a steady firmness. "I really am flying on this jet." Todd forced a polite smile. "Of course," he said, turning on his heel and heading to the staff corridor. Inside, though, he rolled his eyes. Kids these days, he thought, they just can't wait to brag. A few minutes later, Nia settled into one of the sleek lounge chairs. She texted her father, "Dad, I'm at the lounge. Everything okay?" She got no immediate reply. Instead, she found a sudden presence looming over her. Todd stood there, arms folded across his navy blue pilot's uniform. The stripes on his shoulders caught the overhead light. "Listen," he said, "our departure might be delayed. If you're just here to hang around, I'd appreciate it if you stay out of the way. Our ground crew is bustling with preparations." Nia was taken aback. "I'm not in anyone's way," she replied, looking around the not-so-crowded lounge. "Is there something wrong, Captain?" He gave her a scrutinizing once-over. "Are you sure you're with the Simmons party?" She stiffened. "I'm positive," he laughed under his breath. "You wouldn't believe how many times we get star-struck kids trying to sneak onto these flights. They hear about some big name like David Simmons or someone from Hollywood, and then they show up with a sob story. It's a headache for all of us." Nia's eyebrows furrowed in both disbelief and frustration. I'm not sneaking on anything, she insisted. I'm Nia Simmons. David Simmons is my father. Todd froze. Momentarily her tone was sincere and her eyes burned with indignation. Then he quickly recovered, letting out another condescending chuckle. Sure you are, he drawled sarcastically. Don't take it personally, but a man like David Simmons, let's just say I picture a different kind of entourage. Her heart pounded. She'd encountered prejudice before, but this felt especially raw. A different entourage? Look, Captain, is there a reason you think I'm lying? Todd shrugged again. Look, the real big shots come in here with a group of assistants, often with designer luggage that costs more than most people's entire wardrobes, maybe a watch that's worth more than my annual salary. No offense, but you look like you're on your way to a college open house, not a multi-million-dollar private jet flight. He gave her scuffed sneakers a mocking glance. Nia felt heat rise to her cheeks. A swirl of emotions flooded her mind, anger, embarrassment, sadness, but she refused to cower. Are you saying my father's success only counts if I wear certain clothes? Don't twist my words, Todd said firmly. Let's just say I've been around enough to spot fakers. If you're not who you claim to be, you should come clean now. Less trouble for everyone. Nia took a calming breath. Well, Captain Todd Mitchell, you'll see soon enough when my father arrives, she said, crossing her arms. But in the meantime, I don't appreciate the accusations. The tension was thick enough to slice with a knife as Todd stalked away, ignoring the stares of a couple of other travelers in the lounge who'd overheard the heated exchange. Nia felt her pulse throb in her ears. She took another breath, reminding herself, be calm. Dad always says, class is how you handle yourself under pressure. As the hour ticked by, Nia decided to busy herself reviewing company documents her father had emailed her for the upcoming internship. Even though she was anxious, she wanted to be prepared. Yet a nagging worry tugged at her thoughts. Why was her dad late? A second pilot and a flight attendant arrived in the lounge, greeting Todd with friendly nods. They prepared to head out to the tarmac. Todd glowered at Nia one last time before stepping away. The lounge attendant approached her moments later. Miss Simmons, I just received word that your father's flight from New York was slightly delayed. He should be here in about half an hour. Sorry for the inconvenience. Nia offered a small smile of gratitude. Thank you, that's all I needed to know. The moment the attendant walked away, Todd returned. It was almost as though he'd been eavesdropping. Half an hour, huh? He remarked, leaning against the lounge's glass wall that overlooked the busy runway. The posture read as casual, but there was a hint of sarcasm in his voice. Is that what Daddy told you? Because if you're lying, you're about to waste a lot of my time. Nia clenched her jaw. Look, I'm not lying. We have the new Gulfstream 700 waiting. You are the pilot, right? Then you'll be flying me, my father, and whomever else he brings. She mustered all the confidence she could manage. I've been waiting here for 2 hours. If anyone's wasted time, it's me, Todd smirked. Could have fooled me. You don't exactly fit the mold for a girl about to hop on a multi-million-dollar private jet. Where's your staff? No personal assistants? Security detail? Press coverage? David Simmons is a big name. You sure you're not just a friend tagging along for a joyride? Nia shook her head, exasperated. He's my dad, she emphasized again. He likes to keep life simple. No paparazzi, no constant bodyguards in suits. Does that surprise you? He shrugged. I guess I expected more flair, more presence. Nia wanted to say so many things in that moment about his narrow assumptions, about how not everyone flaunted wealth, about how some folks had the decency to keep a low profile. But she knew anything she said would bounce off his arrogance. So she turned her focus back to her phone, hoping this bizarre confrontation would end. But Todd seemed determined to push. You know, this line of work has taught me to sniff out the truth. People come up with all sorts of elaborate acts. If you're not the real deal, best you admit it now before we find out and security escorts you off the premises. I've seen it happen. Stop accusing me, Nia snapped, exhaling. I have no reason to fabricate any story. Once my father arrives, you'll know the truth. The pilot gave a non-committal grunt and walked away. Nia felt exhausted by the hostility. Stay calm, she told herself again. He'll eat his words soon. The next half hour felt like an eternity. Nia scrolled through her phone, half reading the corporate documents, half messaging her friend about the surreal experience she was currently living. She described the pilot's condescending attitude, how humiliating it was to be doubted like that. Her friend typed back, "He'll regret it. He messed with the wrong girl." That small bit of validation comforted Nia. Finally, just as the attendant had promised, David Simmons breezed in through the tinted glass doors. He looked every inch the confident executive, though there was no flamboyance to it, no gold watch, no cluster of assistants. He walked with purpose, wearing a well-cut suit that fit his tall frame and carried only a single briefcase. He spotted his daughter immediately. "Nia, sweetheart," he called, wrapping her in a warm hug. "I'm so sorry I'm late. The plane from New York ran into a weather delay." Nia exhaled with relief. "No worries, Dad. I'm just glad you're finally here." Their display of affection drew some glances from the staff. No one would question that they were indeed family. Todd, who happened to be walking through the lounge at that moment, slowed his pace. She caught a glimpse of confusion flickering across his face. She met his eyes squarely, her gaze screaming, "Told you so." David Simmons escorted his daughter toward the attendant's desk to confirm the final details before departure. "Is the 700 ready?" he asked the attendant. "Yes, Mr. Simmons," the attendant replied with a gracious smile. "The plane has been fueled, the crew is on standby, and we're good to go whenever you are." Todd was forced to linger there, listening. His cheeks reddened, but he managed a quick nod at David Simmons. "Good afternoon, Mr. Simmons. Welcome. I'm your pilot for the trip to London." "Excellent," David said politely, extending his hand. "I'm David Simmons. This is my daughter, Nia." Todd forced a professional courtesy and shook David's hand, then turned stiffly toward Nia. "My apologies for the confusion earlier," he said, not sounding apologetic at all. "Glad you made it, sir." Nia pursed her lips, feeling the tension coil in the air. Her father didn't appear to notice he was busy clarifying final flight times with the lounge staff, eager to get in the air. David, Nia, and Todd, along with the second pilot, co-pilot, and a flight attendant, walked onto the tarmac under the glowing afternoon sun. The 700 glistened in the sunshine, its sleek metallic frame an engineering marvel. The name of David's holding company, Simmons Global Consultants, was elegantly emblazoned on the jet's tail. But that wasn't all. Along the side of the fuselage, in distinctive lettering, read NIAS Dream. It was a surprise. David had orchestrated. He had decided to name the plane in honor of his daughter, hoping to encourage her to chase her own ambitions, to remind her that nothing was out of reach. The company name was small compared to that single phrase, NIAS Dream. Nia froze. For a moment, she thought her eyes were playing tricks on her, but there it was, big as day, her name. On the side of a brand-new Gulfstream 700, she felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, a whirlwind of emotions surging. Pride, love, astonishment. David turned to Nia, his expression shining with fatherly affection. "Surprise," he said, smiling sheepishly. "I know it's a bit extravagant to name a jet, but I wanted something that would remind you every time you board that you have infinite possibilities, and no one should ever make you feel small or out of place." Todd stood behind them, his jaw slightly slack, eyes glued to the lettering. He blinked, disbelief flooding his features. Nia's Dream? Named after her? He'd spent the entire day mocking Nia, telling her to quit pretending, and now he was looking at undeniable proof that she wasn't just a random kid. She was David Simmons's beloved daughter, and apparently so important to him that he named his brand new multi-million-dollar jet after her. David put a hand on Nia's shoulder and guided her onto the steps that led inside the aircraft's opulent cabin. Todd had no choice but to follow, flabbergasted and internally mortified. The rest of the crew pretended not to notice Todd's discomfort, though the flight attendant had seen enough to piece together the tension. She gave Todd a subtle, disapproving glance, as if to say, "Way to go, you really put your foot in it." Inside, the cabin was more akin to a luxurious living room than an airplane. Plush leather seats, a dining area, high-speed Wi-Fi, even a small lounge corner for relaxation. The color scheme was tasteful cream upholstery with subtle gold accents. A large mahogany desk was tucked away near the back, presumably for David to conduct business mid-flight. Nia was awestruck. She'd known her father was successful, that he had the resources to purchase lavish items. But seeing this up close, with her name etched on the exterior, felt surreal. It was a stark reminder of the difference between her father's everyday humility and the world of power and privilege he truly inhabited. She took her seat, still trying to calm the emotional swirl in her heart. David settled across from her, sending a quick email from his phone about a meeting in London. Meanwhile, Todd busied himself with the pre-flight checks, trying to keep his composure. He offered them the usual safety briefing, voice trembling slightly. David thanked him politely, but didn't notice Todd's acute discomfiture. Nia, on the other hand, could sense Todd's humiliation. She stole a glance at him. His stern face was flushed. For a split second, she almost felt sorry for him. Then she recalled how he had sneered at her earlier, ridiculed her shoes, and insinuated that she was an intruder. She let that memory remind her that some lessons come with a bite. The engines roared to life, and Nia felt the gentle press of acceleration as the aircraft taxied and took off. Atlanta receded below them, a grid of highways and tiny buildings. Her father turned to her. "We've got about 8 hours. Might be a bit more if we hit strong headwinds over the Atlantic. Make yourself comfortable." She nodded, pulling out her notes and a laptop to review her internship schedule. But her mind kept drifting to the pilot and how he would handle the rest of the flight, now that his assumptions had been shattered. 2 hours into the flight, the plane cruised smoothly at 41,000 feet. Nia tried to sink into her reading, but she was restless. She wandered toward the cabin's small kitchenette area to grab a bottle of water. Unexpectedly, she saw Todd leaning against the narrow counter, rummaging for something in a cabinet. He paused when she entered. An awkward silence lingered. Nia debated whether to ignore him and leave, but she took a steady breath. "Captain Mitchell," she said softly. He turned around, meeting her eyes with a flash of apprehension. He cleared his throat. "Yes, Miss Simmons." He had shifted from calling her kid or offering sardonic remarks. Now it was Miss Simmons. Nia studied his face. "You have something you want to say?" she asked. "I can't help but notice you were pretty convinced I was lying before." He paused, grappling for words. "Listen, I didn't know," he muttered. "These private flights, they attract all sorts. I've seen stowaways, con artists. I was just—" she raised an eyebrow. "But you singled me out. Because I'm young, or because I'm black, or because I wear simple clothes. You assumed I wasn't the real deal." He inhaled sharply, perhaps stung by the directness of her observation. I'm not racist, if that's what you're insinuating," he said defensively. You didn't look the part." Nia felt her blood boil at the phrase. "And what exactly does part look like?" His mouth flapped for a moment, searching for an answer. "You know, fancy clothes, expensive luggage, maybe an entourage. Something more typical for a wealthy businessman's daughter." I apologize if I offended you." She let out a bitter chuckle. "That's quite an apology. I'm sorry if you were offended." "Captain Mitchell, it's not about the clothes or the entourage. It's about the assumptions you make about people before getting to know them." His eyes darted away. "Point taken," he said quietly. "I was out of line. Truth be told, I've seen a lot of nepotism in this business. I guess I'm quick to judge. That's on me." Nia folded her arms. "All right. Well, I appreciate you actually acknowledging it, though it doesn't feel particularly sincere. In any case, we'll be sharing this plane for the next several hours, and I'm going to be flying back and forth quite often since I'm interning in London this summer. So let's keep this professional, please." He nodded uncomfortably. "Understood, Miss Simmons." Nia grabbed her water and left him to stew in his thoughts. She felt a surge of empowerment at standing her ground. The pilot's discomfort was a small victory, yet in truth it was more than that. It was a reminder that she deserved respect, no matter how she dressed or how young she was. After an otherwise uneventful flight across the Atlantic, the aircraft descended over the patchwork fields and winding roads of England. London's skyline appeared in the distance, a mosaic of ancient spires and modern skyscrapers. Nia felt her heart flutter with excitement. She'd been to London once before with her father, but only briefly. This time, she would spend a whole summer immersing herself in the corporate environment and exploring the city's rich history and culture. When they touched down and taxied to a private hangar, a small team of David's London-based associates stood ready to greet them. The doors opened and a flight attendant laid out the steps. David disembarked first, shaking hands with the associates. Nia followed, blinking in the mild, overcast English daylight. She heard the hush of the ground crew around her and felt Todd's presence behind her as he finished his post-landing tasks. She turned to see him, meeting her gaze briefly. Then he walked away to confer with the co-pilot. She wondered if, from this moment on, he would change how he dealt with people who didn't look the part of the wealthy. Part of her doubted it. Some prejudices are stubborn. Still, as she and her father were ushered into a waiting limousine, Nia let out a long breath. That flight had been more emotionally draining than she'd expected. She was glad it was over, and ironically, it was only the beginning of her grand adventure in London. Settling into London life took a few days. Nia moved into a classy yet understated apartment near the office in Canary Wharf. She marveled at the new environment. The city's constant hustle, the swirl of double-decker buses, the chime of Big Ben in the distance, and the aroma of fresh pastries from corner bakeries. Her father's company, Simmons Global Consultants, occupied several floors in a tall glass building. On her first day, she walked through the doors in a pencil skirt and blouse, determined to look professional. She was greeted by staff with warm smiles and welcomes. She was Mr. Simmons's daughter, yes, but also an eager new intern. In meeting after meeting, she absorbed everything: marketing strategies, data analytics, client relations, even how to handle cross-continental conference calls at odd hours. Her assigned mentor was a sharp-minded woman named Priya Mehta, a senior executive at the London office. Priya was straightforward, patient, and seemed genuinely excited to show Nia the ropes. "We'll rotate you through different departments," Priya explained on the first day. "We want you to get a feel for every facet of the business. You'll be shadowing me for the strategic projects, but you'll also spend time in finance, HR, and marketing." Nia nodded, thankful for the thorough approach. She wanted to understand the business from the ground up, just as her father had done. In the evenings, David and Nia would share dinner, discussing her experiences. It felt more like they were colleagues than father and daughter sometimes, but she cherished that dimension to their relationship. Meanwhile, Todd Mitchell's insulting behavior lingered in the back of her mind like an annoying thorn you don't quite forget. However, Time moved on, and Nia's summer grew busier. She occasionally flew back to the United States for weekends or to other European cities for client meetings. Each time she traveled on Nia's dream, Todd was often the pilot. He'd grown careful, guarded, no longer openly hostile, but definitely not friendly. Nia found it easy to keep interactions short and to the point. Little did she know, Todd's resentment was brewing. That initial humiliation he'd experienced in Atlanta had only festered. Every time he saw the words NIAS Dream on the jet, it served as a reminder of his embarrassing miscalculation. He loathed the notion that he had to pilot a plane named after a teenager he'd once belittled. It was a direct blow to his pride. He might have apologized superficially, but deep inside, he was waiting for a chance to reverse the power dynamic. Midway through Nia's internship, she accompanied Priya and a small team to Budapest for a high-stakes negotiation with a potential European partner. If successful, it would be one of Simmons Global Consultants' largest acquisitions in years, expanding the firm's reach in Eastern Europe. David, who was tied up with other obligations, entrusted Nia to tag along, observe, and learn. It was a significant show of faith in her, and Nia wanted to do her father proud. The flight from London to Budapest was supposed to be a short one. Todd Mitchell was at the helm again. The takeoff was smooth, the morning sun slicing through the clouds as they headed east. Nia sat beside Priya, reviewing last-minute meeting notes. Suddenly, about half an hour into the flight, Todd's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We're experiencing an unexpected mechanical issue that requires immediate landing. We'll be diverting back to London City Airport. Apologies for the inconvenience." Nia and Priya shared a concerned glance. A mechanical issue? On a brand new 700? It was possible, but extremely rare. "We can't miss the meeting," Priya muttered. "We're on a tight schedule. If this deal doesn't go through—" "I know," Nia whispered, buckling her seatbelt as they began a sharp bank. She felt a pang of dread. Was the plane truly unsafe, or was this something else? They landed at London City Airport, where the ground crew and maintenance personnel swarmed the plane. Todd stepped off the cockpit, looking grim. "We detected an engine alert. I'm afraid we can't continue until it's cleared," he informed the passengers. Priya's face fell. "This is a brand new plane," she said. "Engine alert? Can the maintenance team fix it quickly?" "We need to be in Budapest by noon." The pilot shrugged. "Safety first," he said flatly, not meeting anyone's eyes for too long. Nia felt something was off. Todd looked almost smug, like a cunning cat that had cornered a mouse, but she had no proof of wrongdoing. At best, she could only suspect that Todd might be orchestrating a delay. Why would he do that? Priya scrambled to arrange an alternative flight, but it was too last minute. Most private jets were booked out. Commercial flights would risk them missing the crucial meeting. Frustration loomed. An hour passed. 2 hours. The maintenance team found no engine irregularities, much to the perplexity of the entire staff. They tested the system repeatedly and gave the plane a clean bill of health. "Captain, we can't find any fault," the lead technician explained. Todd rubbed his chin. "Better keep checking," he insisted. "I saw an alert on the cockpit panel." Priya's phone rang. The Budapest partners were waiting. If they didn't arrive soon, the entire negotiation might fall apart. Desperate, Priya found a separate charter that could fly them out of Heathrow. It would still likely make them late, but it was better than waiting indefinitely for Todd to sign off. As Nia boarded the alternative plane with Priya, she looked over her shoulder at Todd, who stood in front of NIAS Dream with a vaguely triumphant expression. She couldn't help but wonder if this was his twisted form of payback. In Budapest, Priya's negotiations were tense from the start. They arrived late, rushed, and stressed. The potential partners, disgruntled by the delay, demanded concessions. The entire discussion almost derailed. Only Priya's calm expertise and skillful diplomacy saved the day. Nia offered a couple of suggestions from her vantage point, surprising the group with her perceptive questions. After hours of intense debate, they managed to salvage the deal. They parted ways with cautious optimism. When they finally returned to London, exhausted, Nia discovered that NIAS Dream was cleared for flight less than 2 hours after they had departed for Heathrow. No serious malfunction found, the maintenance documents read. Todd's official note was that the cockpit sensors had malfunctioned, giving him a false alarm. Nia felt anger simmer inside her. A false alarm? Or pilot sabotage? She decided not to mention it to her father yet, but the possibility gnawed at her. If Todd had forced them into a diversion out of spite, that would mean he endangered the negotiations and cost the company money, time, and reputation merely to fuel his bitter pride. For the next few weeks, Nia traveled around Europe and occasionally back to the US. Sometimes on NIAS Dream, sometimes on other charters, if scheduling required. The sense of normalcy returned, though tension lingered in the background. She mostly avoided Todd, not wanting another confrontation. The other pilot who sometimes flew her father seemed polite and professional, but the seeds of suspicion about Todd's intentions grew roots. A second suspicious incident occurred on a flight from Rome to Paris, when Todd again claimed a fuel sensor malfunction that forced a refuel in Milan. Maintenance found no anomalies afterward. The delay caused David Simmons to miss a high-profile networking event in Paris. Still, no one had definitive proof of wrongdoing, and in corporate environments, accusations without evidence often do more harm than good. So Nia and her father quietly collected data maintenance logs, patterns of Todd's technical issues, flight schedules. They began to realize that these malfunctions always seemed to happen when Nia or David had an especially important event. The final straw came one crisp afternoon in late July, a month before Nia's internship was scheduled to end. She and David were set to fly from London to Berlin for a massive tech conference where David was a keynote speaker, and Nia was to give a short talk on youth empowerment and diversity in the corporate sphere, her first official speaking engagement. She'd spent weeks perfecting her speech, planning to highlight the importance of inclusive hiring practices, something her father's company championed. They arrived at the private hangar, only to see Todd and the crew standing by the plane, arms crossed. Todd approached David with a contrived look of remorse. "I'm sorry, Mr. Simmons, but we have a cabin pressure warning that we need to check out." David's expression hardened. "Not again, Captain. This plane has been inspected daily. We just had a thorough check last night." Todd shrugged, feigning helplessness. "Sir, the alarm is persistent. I can't fly like this." "We'll need a full inspection. Might take hours. Could be the entire day if the parts need replacement." Nia felt her heartbeat race with frustration. This time, David decided to push back. "Let me see that alert," he demanded, marching into the cockpit. Nia followed, her blood boiling. The cockpit was silent. The instrument panel blinked with the normal array of digital readings. No glaring red alerts signaled cabin pressure issues. David tapped the screen, flipping through system statuses. Everything read normal. He turned to Todd, eyes narrowed. "Where exactly is this warning?" Todd scowled, leaning forward to punch a few buttons. "It was right here," he claimed, pointing. Yet the panel remained fully green, indicating no issues. David exhaled slowly, his anger carefully contained. "Captain Mitchell, I see no warning." Are you sure you're not mixing up what you saw with another system?" Todd hesitated. Then, in an almost childlike protest, he muttered, "It flickered earlier. Then it disappeared." We can't take a chance with cabin pressure. Nia's chest constricted with fury. She and her father exchanged a knowing glance. This was the evidence they needed. Clearly, Todd was faking issues. David shook his head, stepping back from the cockpit. "All right, Captain, we won't force you to fly if you feel unsafe." Todd's posture relaxed, as if he'd won. "Better safe than sorry, Mr. Simmons," he said. David looked at his daughter, then calmly stated, "Nia, we'll have to find another flight option." She nodded, but inside she was fuming. Todd had pulled this stunt right before her first speaking engagement. If David was late, the entire keynote might have to be cancelled or postponed. She worried about letting the conference organizers down. They scrambled to switch to a commercial flight, though it meant a less comfortable trip and the risk of missing the opening session. Priya assisted from London, booking them seats on a British Airways flight that departed in 2 hours from Heathrow. It was the best they could do under the circumstances. They managed to board the commercial flight with minutes to spare, landing in Berlin just in time. David delivered his keynote with his usual brilliance, while Nia gave her own short speech, albeit slightly rushed. The audience responded with warmth and applause. She had done it. Yet in the back of her mind, the anger over Todd's sabotage simmered. Over dinner that evening, David finally turned to Nia. "We can't ignore this any longer," he said. "Todd's either incompetent or deliberately messing with us. Either way, he's putting my schedules, your schedules, and the company's obligations at risk. He's risking our reputation. It's not acceptable." Nia's jaw set. "Are you going to fire him?" David was quiet for a moment. "We could, but I have a feeling he'd deny it all or feign ignorance, and we'd get stuck in a messy legal tangle. He might claim unfair dismissal. We need something more concrete. If we get that, then we can decide how to handle him." Nia nodded. Then a thought struck her, a sense of poetic justice forming in her mind. "Let's wait for a moment when we can catch him in the act," she suggested. "Get real-time evidence. Let the truth speak for itself." David raised an eyebrow, a small smile curving his lips. "You're thinking like a strategist. I like it." They devised a plan. David had an important business trip to Dubai in 2 weeks, which Todd would almost certainly pilot. If Todd tried his sabotage again, they would be ready. They'd use discreet cameras, staff from the maintenance department, and digital logs that tracked the plane's instruments in real time. If Todd claimed a phony mechanical error, the sensors and video recordings would capture him making it up. 2 weeks later, in the early hours of a crisp morning, David and Nia arrived at the private hangar for their flight to Dubai. The plane gleamed under the floodlights, NIAS Dream. The maintenance crew had been instructed to be on standby, the internal system logs rolling. Additional cameras had been fitted quietly in corners of the cockpit and the maintenance bay. Todd was there, looking tense but composed. The flight attendant welcomed David and Nia aboard. Todd did the usual checks. Nia's heart thumped with anticipation. Would Todd do it again? They taxied to the runway, and Nia was beginning to think Todd might have wised up. But just as the jet lined up for takeoff, Todd's voice crackled overhead. "Mr. Simmons, Miss Simmons, I'm sorry, but I'm seeing an alert here for the fuel system. We'll need to return to the hangar to verify. Apologies, but I can't risk a transcontinental flight with a potential fuel system error." Nia exchanged a look with her father. They kept their expressions neutral, though inside they felt a surge of grim satisfaction. He took the bait. They returned to the hangar. Todd insisted on an inspection. The maintenance chief, who was in on the plan, performed a thorough check as the discreet camera captured every move. The logs recorded each system's status. Unsurprisingly, nothing was wrong. Todd, however, insisted there was an alert. The maintenance chief pulled up the real-time system logs on a tablet, standing beside Todd. "Captain, the system logs show no warnings, no anomalies." Could you point out exactly where you're seeing this alert in the cockpit? Todd marched back into the cockpit, the maintenance chief following, while a small camera recorded them. Todd jabbed at the screen, but no caution lights were active. The chief scrolled through the logs, shaking his head. Captain, according to these logs, there was never any alert. Are you absolutely sure? Beads of sweat formed on Todd's brow. He was cornered. Nia, David, and the co-pilot stood in the cabin, listening. The silence grew thick. Finally, the chief turned to Todd. I'll have to report this. False alarm if the logs show nothing. We can't ground the flight for no reason, especially for something you can't replicate or show proof of. Todd's face twisted in panic, but he forced a smirk. Maybe it was a glitch in the system that cleared itself. The chief gave him a grim nod, as if to say, "You're not fooling anyone." Back in the cabin, David quietly typed a message to the legal department. He had everything he needed. The meltdown was about to begin. Nia watched, her emotions swirling. Part of her hated seeing Todd sweat, but another part believed he fully deserved the consequences for his malicious attempts to sabotage them. An hour later, the legal team arrived at the hangar, accompanied by the head of flight operations. Todd tried to act calm, but the tension was palpable. David faced him with unwavering composure. "Captain Mitchell, we have video footage, system logs, and witness statements indicating you repeatedly fabricated mechanical issues. This is unacceptable. Effective immediately, your services are terminated. The legal team will coordinate any further actions regarding liability for damages you may have caused." Todd paled. He stammered, This is a misunderstanding. You can't just, we can and we have," David said firmly. "We trusted you to ensure safe, efficient flights. You exploited that trust for petty revenge or personal grievances, costing my company time and money and risking people's safety. Our evidence is ironclad. I suggest you consult an attorney." Nia stood silently behind her father, arms crossed, observing Todd's meltdown. He sputtered, "But you can't prove it was intentional. Maybe I did see alerts. It's not my fault the system logs missed them." The head of flight operations shook his head in disgust. "Captain Mitchell, a brand new G700 doesn't lie, and neither do logs and video footage that capture real-time status. We also have data from the manufacturer. You manipulated these so-called errors. This has to end here." Todd's face morphed from rage to panic to despair. "It's because of that girl, isn't it?" He glared at Nia. "She's the reason. I tried to teach her a lesson, that just because her daddy's rich doesn't mean—" David raised a hand, cutting him off. "That's enough," he said coolly. "My daughter did nothing to you except exist. Your bigotry and your bitterness led you down a path of self-destruction. I'm done talking. Leave." Security personnel stepped forward. For a moment, Todd looked like he might try to argue further, but the presence of uniformed men with unwavering expressions silenced him. He turned on his heel, storming off the aircraft, escorted away from the hangar. Nia felt a complex swirl of emotions: relief, triumph, sadness at how petty some people could be. But mostly relief. It was done. In the days that followed, word spread quickly about Todd's dismissal. In the insular world of private aviation, reputation was everything. Pilots who had soared for decades were only as secure as their last safe flight record. The news that Todd Mitchell had concocted fake mechanical issues to sabotage his employer's schedule was an instant black mark. No airline, no charter company, no private flight operator wanted that liability on their hands. Within a week, Todd was effectively blacklisted. He tried to fight the legal case, but David's attorneys, armed with overwhelming evidence, left no angle uncovered. Todd found himself facing a breach of contract lawsuit for the damages caused by missed business opportunities. He also risked losing his pilot's license if the aviation authorities concluded that he willfully compromised safety. Meanwhile, Nia continued her internship, free of disruptions. The story of Todd's downfall floated around the edges of conversation, but Nia preferred to stay focused on her work. When colleagues hinted at it, she'd shrug and say, "Sometimes people sabotage themselves. It's unfortunate." Her father's approach was equally measured. He let the legal process unfold while making it clear. He took the well-being of his company and his daughter seriously. If Todd was searching for sympathy, he wouldn't find it in the private aviation circles. That was his hard karma hitting back. Months passed. Nia's summer internship had ended on a high note. She returned to the US for her freshman year of college, though she continued to help her father's company on special projects. NIAS Dream remained the family's prized aircraft, carrying them from one corner of the globe to the other now with a new pilot, Captain Rodriguez, whose professionalism and warmth left Nia grateful every time she flew. But fate had another twist in store. One winter break, Nia and her father were at an airport in Chicago. Nia's grandmother lived there, and they'd spent the holidays together. They were flying commercial this time, just a simple domestic flight to get back to Atlanta. As they waited at the gate, sipping coffee, Nia glanced at one of the bars in the terminal. There, wearing a wrinkled button-down shirt, looking disheveled and worn, sat Todd Mitchell. He was hunched over a glass of water, staring at a job listing on his phone. The shadows under his eyes told of restless nights. A battered suitcase leaned against his stool. David noticed him too. Their eyes met. Todd stiffened, his face flushing. He looked away immediately, as though shamed into invisibility. Nia's heart squeezed with a strange pity. Despite everything, she couldn't help but feel a twinge of compassion. He had dug his own grave with prejudice and sabotage, but it was still sad to see him so defeated. When it was time to board, David and Nia walked past Todd's table. He flinched slightly, as if expecting a gloat or mocking remark. Instead, David simply nodded at him, a silent acknowledgement that Todd was still a human being, if a flawed one. Nia gave him a brief, polite incline of her head, nothing more to say. Then they continued toward their flight, leaving Todd to confront his choices alone. Life resumed. Nia thrived in her college environment, majoring in business administration with a minor in social justice. She stayed close with her father, who occasionally asked for her input on philanthropic endeavors. They worked to create scholarships for underprivileged students, reflecting the journey David himself had taken from poverty to prosperity. Though the memory of Todd's condescending remarks still stung, Nia had transformed that negativity into fuel for her ambitions. She refused to let anyone define her based on what they thought a rich black girl should look like, act like, or dress like. Her father's heartfelt gift, naming the jet NIAS Dream, reminded her that she was free to define her own destiny. Back at Simmons Global Consultants, the hush that once surrounded Todd's sabotage turned into a cautionary tale about prejudice and arrogance. It became a story told in orientation sessions, albeit with names omitted, to demonstrate the importance of professionalism, respect, and integrity in all interactions. And somewhere in Chicago's labyrinth of busy terminals, Todd Mitchell faced the repercussions of his choices. Maybe he found a path to redemption and self-awareness, or maybe he continued to blame the world for his problems. But that was his journey to navigate. As for Nia, she continued to soar both literally and figuratively toward her future. Thank you for joining us in this rollercoaster tale of underestimation, resilience, and karmic justice. From a pilot's dismissive sneers to an epic downfall, this story proves that the truth always rises to the surface, and that those who underestimate others often pay the steepest price. Nia's quiet strength and her father's unwavering support remind us that genuine character and true worth aren't measured by flashy clothes or outward appearances. In a world quick to judge based on stereotypes, remember that dignity and respect will always outlast prejudice. If you enjoyed this story and found its lessons inspiring, please hit that like button. Share it with friends who might need a reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and subscribe to our channel for more uplifting, dramatic tales. We appreciate your support in helping us spread real stories that celebrate perseverance and hope. Until next time, keep dreaming big and staying true to who you are.